Now on today's question and answer video, we got quite a nice supply of things to share. An 1,100-mile ride on a TENARE. We have several comments, good and bad, about our videos. How to convert bikes that have clip-ons to handlebars. We have even some more things about paint. Extensive discussion about paint and fisheyes and carbon fiber. And Pirelli Angels, more information on Pirelli Angels. And the final thing, and I researched this out to make sure I had the accurate things to put up here. When you have a bent rim, in the case of the FZR, I dug out all the information from several years ago of how I did it, and I condensed it down. I think that'll be very, very useful information for a lot of people. This is our question and answer video number 15. We're going to answer some of the comments that have come in on the channel. There's going to be some really good paint information that I think a lot of people will find useful. And we have some people that have gotten new bikes. We have a little photo show to show. I think you'll really enjoy that. And there's also one of the things I've been looking to detail out on a video of doing these bikes that I've converted from clip-ons to handlebars, and how I've gone about doing it. I answered the gentleman that asked the question just quick so he would get an idea of how to do it if he was considering that. But I've done several bikes. They've all worked out to my satisfaction. This is information I think you can use, and we share it with the idea in mind. You'll enjoy it and maybe benefit from it, save a little time, aggravation, maybe even some money. And thank you to everyone that's ever shared information on my videos. Many people have shared the information, helped other people along the way, saved them a lot of aggravation, and plus it's been a lot of fun. Now I want to start off today's video, a very simple thing I always try to do. Congratulate my friends that have gotten new motorcycles. Ray in Florida got a Ninja for his birthday, a 400 Ninja. Now he has the standard sit-up version and the Ninja version. And one at his summer house, one at his winter house. That's pretty cool. I like that. Anyway, congratulations, Ray. And congratulations to Luciano. He's doing the final parts of getting a Bandit restored. He has another Bandit in his collection. And I always try not to leave anybody out that's got a new bike. I know Jose is looking at a new bike. I don't think he got it yet. Anyway, the big one, Stefan in Romania. And Stefan, boy, did I ever get blown away by this. I showed these pictures to Karen. She was blown away too. Now I'm just going to set the stage here. Because I took notes while Stefan and I email each other back and forth. He had told me he was getting a new bike. He's doing a lot of track days, so I thought maybe he's getting a track bike, any brand, version, whatever. And what he got was a Yamaha TENARE, a T7. Now, I was not real familiar with that bike. I'm not an on-road, off-road guy. I kind of like custom bikes that basically just are just for the street anyway. But anyway, he did something similar to what I did with a car. He went and picked up the bike, went on an 1,100+ mile ride for the first ride, had it serviced in the middle of had this all laid out ahead of time. You can tell this guy's a lot smarter than me. He went on, and I really don't know how to pronounce this one. He went on the Transfugistan Highway, and I have pictures to share, and saw bears, got chased by bears, not eaten by a bear, though. That's the one that counts. And he said, on this trip, and I'm going to show the pictures right after this little set the stage here, we'll segue into the pictures. It was 100 degrees plus sometimes, so I guess he was pouring water down his neck like I do. And I just want to show these pictures. These are some really nice pictures. Now I can tell that he has excellent photography skills. We've featured his pictures on a video before, but the truth is, anybody that would like to have their bike featured, send me some pictures to FZR Guy, and I'll put that up on the screen, FZR Guy 72618, that's my AMA number, at Gmail, and we'll feature you on the next one. Okay, so I want to show these photos. Now, we've been friends with Stefan for a while now. We've seen his track bike. He had an MT-09. He has a track bike, a Triumph. I think he has a Suzuki too. But the TENARE is something, it's new to me. I didn't even know what the bike looked like till he sent these photos. These are some really cool photos, and congratulations to everybody who's gotten a new bike. My birthday's coming up in about a week, I won't be getting a new bike for my birthday. So these are the pictures we got from Stefan. This is his bike. It's a T7, a TENARE, a Yamaha. And I was not familiar with the bike. It's an on-road, off-road bike. He has done a lot of dirt bike riding, I assume, or he would not have this bike. I don't do any dirt bike off-roading. I stopped doing that about 20 years ago, and when my back was hurting, my legs were wearing out, and needless to say, right now it's totally out of the question. But he's a young guy, and look at some of the scenery here and his photography skills. He is a very skilled photographer, like Joe Roselli is. And as I look at this, it's making me want to have an on-road, off-road bike. Now, I know Jose is lusting for the bigger version of this, and he's already told me about how many good features it has. But now the neat part, look at the roads he's on. And I can't even say the name of this highway. It's like the Transylvania Highway or something. And excuse me, Stefan, for not being able to pronounce it. But it's, you look at this, and you look at the beautiful backgrounds here. And this is an 1170 mile ride, right from the dealer, and with one pit stop for the maintenance right in the middle, all scheduled in. And I said, Karen and I did this with our minivan. We drove to California with it and picked up the plates in Midway in South Dakota. Look at this ride. Look at these roads. Can you imagine how much fun this would be? No matter what bike you have, if you had a sport bike, a touring bike, whatever. But I'm assuming, but I don't know for sure, that this is all in Romania. And maybe if it's not, Stefan will correct me. But a lot of different various types of things. Now, what he said is he took so many pictures and so many nice scenes along the way, and we got some pictures to show of the scenes. The bike looks awesome. I wish I still had the body to do dirt bike riding, but at the end, you don't have. That's the first thing to go. Look at it. You could ride right out into the water here, and I'm sure some of the beaches there are beautiful. Look at this. It looks like Las Vegas or something. Beautiful, beautiful area. And Stefan, I thank you so much for sharing this. I hope you have some video of this trip to share too at some point in time. And I know you have a GoPro and all of that stuff. And if you do, we'll gladly share it with our friends here. Actually, our friends worldwide. We're going to be getting some stuff. I know we're going to get some more stuff from Australia very soon. Thank you, Stefan. Okay, the next question comes from Glenn in Australia, and we have several friends in Australia that we've communicated with over the years. Glenn, we hope you'll be one of them too. Now, he asked a question that I really know the answer to in reality, but what happens if you contact a paint company like DuPont or any of these people that make it? They're going to tell you some of this is not true. The reason I've gotten away with it is, and I'll try to explain this, is I'm not doing commercial work. So in other words, when I paint something, a motorcycle or a model plane, I'm not leaving it out in the sun for weeks at a time, letting snow get on it. I'm not flying a jet plane at 600 miles an hour where the paint's going to peel off. My use is for personal use. I've done a lot of experimenting with paint. Now, let me just tell a little story. The question Glenn had, he wanted to know if you could put base coat, clear coat, obviously automotive 4-to-1 paint, and I have some over there that I'd show the label on, and if it would work with other products. Now, these are the caveats that I think you really have to be aware of. First off, I've been able to put the paint on almost anything, including tires, and sometimes if you get it on a tire or rubber, it's hard to get off. But like with all paint, it's subject to the rules of engagement, which always are. The part has to be clean, it has to be etched, has some tooth to it. A piece of glass that's got Vaseline on it, not going to stick. It's got to be like sandpaper to stick. So anyway, just to back up a little bit for the people that subscribe to the channel, the wheels on my MT-09, I invented the paint. There's no such paint. I did 4-to-1 and mixed in my own silver pigment, tested it with 10 different variants, and came up with the color that I liked the best. And so far, 2 years later, almost maybe a year and a half, it's still good. And so the one on the R1 is 6-7 years old now. It worked out good. So I have to think, and it's worth telling the story. This is my feeling, is you can put 4-to-1 clear on any paint. The exception might be paints like Rust-Oleum that take a long time to outgas. Now, if you paint something with Rust-Oleum and the next day you put clear on it, it's probably going to turn to an alligator. That's useful information. Some paints, like the paints you buy in Lowe's that you paint I painted my fountain out in front of the house with Rust-Oleum. And then put clear on it, thinking I'd be doing it a favor, and it... Well, Luciano had some wheels he did that alligatored. I know he had other issues. And we always share that information. Rust-Oleum is a unique thing. I'm not sure. And Scott has had some problems with Rust-Oleum. He was thinning it with acetone. Somebody told him he could do that. But he was a good enough man to share the information to help people avoid it. Ow. And our friend in Australia painted a set of wheels for his big Honda. So, another friend in Australia. But anyway, Glenn, I wanted to shorten this. This is a funny, I always like to include a little story. 1987, I painted my first model airplane with a 4-to-1 product, which is really a 3-to-1, called Imran. At that point in time, it was new to the market. I tried it on a model plane. You had to put it on super, super thin with an airbrush because it was heavy. And everybody said, the DuPont rep said, oh, you can't put that over lacquer, because model airplanes are painted with butyrate dope, which is a lacquer. I asked the rep, the DuPont rep down at Chart, and he said, oh, no, you can't do that. That's it. 2 weeks later, I brought the plane to him all buffed out, and I said, there you go. He says, yeah, but that's not going to work, because if you leave that out in the sun for 6 years and then fly 600 miles an hour, it might peel up. Well, I'm not going to do that. So a lot of times you can use a product for not the way it was intended, and if you have that concept in mind, it makes a lot more sense. So anyway, the other thing is, and Vlad just asked me this question. He wants to paint something and not have to buff it out. Okay, if that's the case, you better have a really good spray booth with downdraft equipment. You better have that, what I call the $1,000 spray gun. You better have a respirator. You better, it gets very involved. For me, it's just easier. It's the lesser of two evils. To sand it with 2000 grit and buff it with 8065. And I take the bike to the meetups. I never hear anybody say, oh, there's dust in the paint. Well, I don't know. There may be somebody that does have a more technical way. But my specialty in life is to make good quality things with very little time, money, and energy. Anybody can do this stuff if you have $1 million spray booth and Jay Leno supporting you and whatever. I like to share the information I've been able to get to my level, and I left this piece out here so I could show it, to this level with relatively inexpensive equipment, with $12, $15 spray guns, and the least expensive of the 4-to-1 paint. Now, this is, I just got to mention this, another caveat. There's always a caveat with paint. The caveat is if you go to paint anything that's made out of carbon fiber, that's come out of a mold, that's been reverse molded, a lot of times they put the resin in the mold and then put the carbon fiber in it and then vacuum bag it. A lot of times when they do that, some of the mold release winds up in the carbon fiber, and even though you've sanded it, you got fisheye issues. I have had that in the past. I've detailed out how I've dealt with it in the past, but to make a long story short, you've got to sand the hell out of it, almost to the point you're into the carbon. Put on a coat of the 4-to-1, let it sit for about 2 minutes, wipe it off with acetone, with a clean rag and acetone, put on another coat, you'll have less fish eyes. Wipe that coat off, because the material itself is pulling up the mold release agent that's in there. And painting carbon fiber parts, and I've done a ton of them for Vlad, and not having a fisheye issue is a major thing. Now we're going to be trying to paint his Buell that now has all carbon fiber bodywork over the winter. I guarantee you that's going to be a problem. But we're going to try to solve it, and of course, what we're going to do, of course, is to share it. So just to mention, I have used about 8 or 10 different types of clear. This is the one that comes from Gavin's, and this is the least expensive clear you can buy. And even this works fine. So what I'm saying is, yes, if you're painting jet planes and if you're painting medical instruments or something, but for painting motorcycles that are going to go out in the rain and riding the salty roads, I think this is fine. But the one thing is, these products always, if you paint like I do, they always have to be buffed out. And there's plenty of videos on my channel of how to buff that out. Now, anytime you're using any product that's 4-to-1, any of the 4-to-1 urethanes or Imran, wear a good quality mask. Do not paint any of those parts, anything that needs a hardener, and then breathe in the fumes without a mask. That is good information. Okay, we have a question from Jeremy. Jeremy has Pirelli Angels GS's. He's used them on the track. Now, I'm not doing track days anymore, but I have noticed on my R1, because they're a 2-compound tire, they're a little bit harder than on the durometer, and so I tend to think they're going to last a little longer. They're a little harder, but this is all mystery to me because I don't pretend to be a tire specialist or anything. And there's plenty of good videos out on YouTube if you were looking up track day tires and these kind of things. What I'm interested in, again, is the one simple thing. Am I going to put them on the R1, be able to ride, I'm hoping, 8,000 to 10,000 miles, not have them wear out in the middle or wear out on the edge, or the Dunlops wore out at the edge and the middle had plenty of juice. Michelin's just seem to wear out, the 2s wear out for me on the R1 quicker. But anyway, he's had them for 10 years now. I didn't even know they made them for 10 years. So, Jeremy, that's nice, good information, because and it's not like we're trying to prove we're right or wrong. I have looked at everybody I know that has a Goldwing. Nobody has them on as touring tires because obviously they're at the soft end of, they would not be appropriate for long-range touring. So again, I don't know. Now, the R1 is unique in all the bikes that I have. It really goes through tires. And I have tried Michelin 2s, Michelin 3s, and I'm going to try a pair of Michelin 6s if the Angels wear out in less than 9,000 miles. But again, I won't know that probably for another year until the test of these tires is done. Now, here's the best question, and we're going to try to share this in detail. Chug, I answered you on the video about this. I put a quick reply and I mentioned that I would detail it out here. So Chug said, he had some other comments, but the main one, how do you fix a bent rim? Now, the quick answer to that is, and I would suggest anybody do this, search my channel. If you're in Google, you have to put my name in in YouTube, you have to put my name, once you're in YouTube, in my name in quotation marks, and then FZR Restoration 142 and 143. Those 2 videos detail out how I did it. It's certainly not the only way in the world to do it, but it worked for me. Now, some other information about fixing rims. Luciano had a bent rim, a Comstar rim. We took it to a car place that was fixing car rims, and we watched the guy doing, with his tools and hydraulic presses, but every time they did it, they heated the aluminum. So I watched a bunch of videos on YouTube before I did this, but when I got my FZR, it had been in an accident. That's why I got it cheap. And the back rim had a giant dent in it. And by looking at it, you'd think that tire could never hold air. It held air fine. I rode it like that for some amount of time, but I wanted to do the restoration on the bike. And when I did the restoration, I wanted the rim to be perfect. And I'm going to show some of that. I'll take some outtakes out of this. How I did it. Now, certainly not the only way to do it, but it worked for me. Now that rim is now, I've had the bike more than 10 years. That bike has never even needed to have air added to the back tire when it was bent or now. So I tend to think that's good information to share. And we're going to put some of that right at the end of my comments here. But the caveat of all bending aluminum, you want it to be hot so you don't fracture it. Hot aluminum bends and doesn't fracture. Cold aluminum, you take the same piece of aluminum and bend it, especially if you bend the sharp radius, it fractures. It has fracture cracks. That's typical of aluminum. MAP gas is a must. MAP gas, or if you have an acetylene torch, oxyacetylene. But if the answer is, and Luciano has a bent rim on, let's see what bike he was riding. I don't remember. I don't remember what bike he was riding. We went to a meetup and the back wheel was bent. A lot of times, there's no point even fixing it. If the tire balances and you don't have a vibration issue, and it's not leaking air, and it's not cosmetically awful, like a squirrel took a bite out of it, maybe you're better off just leaving it. But if it starts leaking air or some other, or if cosmetically it bothers you, then do something similar to what I did with the FZR. And again, I'm gonna tack that on right now so you can see. These are outtakes. And by the way, you can search my channel if that's such good information. Any subject. If you put in carbon fiber, up comes carbon fiber. If you put in FZR Restoration. Up comes changing the forks, changing this, changing that, rebuilding the carburetors. There's a wealth of information. And of course there's other people on YouTube that post videos, some a lot better and more detailed. Some, you know, it's all in the eye of the beholder anyway. But all my stuff is always free, and it's always stuff that works for me. Now in the case of the FZR, I didn't have to really worry about bending the rim with heat or anything. That was the final thing if this didn't work. I did a lot of it with JB Weld, and I detailed it out on these two videos, 142, 143. It's really not rocket science, but again, if you do have to bend the aluminum for whatever reason, I would definitely say watch some of the videos that show how to heat it and how to do that efficiently. But the point is, this worked for me. And this is, when things work for me, I know they're not going to work for everybody, but that's why I make the videos and share all of the things that I've done. And in this case, this wheel has lasted me the whole life of the bike. So I don't have any reason to really to do anything that doesn't have to be done. I don't have to fix it if it doesn't break. That wheel repair worked great. And of course, if the tires hold an air, there's really no reason to bend the rim. So I showed on this video how I made a template, how I used JB Weld to do this and make it look exactly like it had no dent in it. And it was a little labor intensive. It goes across the span of two videos, in fact, 142 and 143. But it's very detailed, and there's a lot of parts of this that I'm not sure they would work for everybody. But as an example, the dent that Luciano has in his wheel, this would work on that. And if you have a totally, you've put a flat spot on the wheel or something, well, every wheel, the repair is going to be a little different. And again, I always just try to show what worked for me, how it worked, how I make the templates, how I would have made the final shaping of the material. And in this case, it was JB Weld, and it worked. You go look at the bike right now, and the bike since then probably has another 7,000 or 10,000 miles on it. I don't know. We got way over 30,000 miles on the bike. A lot of them track day miles, where if something was not going to work, well, it would have failed already. And JB Weld, of course, is a pretty sturdy material. And the main thing is, at the end, this worked out great during the restoration of the FZR, and it's all out on the channel. Now here's that FZR rim after 10 years. Has never lost air. It's never been any kind of a problem. The dent is out of it. And to me, I wanted it when I did this restoration. It was 900 hours. I didn't want to compromise it. And that information is all on those videos, 142 and 143, in detail. Now I always enjoy getting little notes and little thank yous and everything on the video channel, and it's nice. I thank everybody that puts nice comments, and even if you put bad comments that have some constructive value where you can give me some alternatives, I'm certainly willing to try. Mark, he sent a nice little comment. He said he's a racer, and he says, I always tip a bottle of water down the back of on a hot day. You know what? And believe it or not, it works. And I know it's hard to convince people how good it works until you try it. Or if you're out, and I'm sure Stefan in Romania was doing some of that when it was 100 degrees. A lot of days I go out on a bike, and I share the rides, of course, and halfway through the day it's a lot hotter than I thought it would, and I always have that bottle of water in my jacket, and I'm good to go for another 45 minutes or an hour. Anyway, now this is kind of a sad, I hate to even say this, a sad comment. A fellow named Dave, he put up a comment. He said that I never use a torque wrench, so he can't take my advice. Well, I can, Dave, I'm not trying to make a contest out of this, but I looked up on my video just randomly, and there's probably at least 20 videos of I demonstrate how to use a torque wrench and how to compare the Craftsman torque wrench to another wrench and the Harbor Freight one, and I have two of them, of course. But it's okay, because when people are misinformed or uninformed, it's easy for them to have the wrong opinion, and we don't want to become enemies. I want to help him understand things, and if he has a great torque wrench that he bought for $1,000, I'd like to see it, or whatever. But a torque wrench is an important thing when you do structural things, like, for instance, putting the axle that holds the wheel on, bolts that hold the motor on, and there's a million if you're assembling a motor. It's critical. And a lot of people don't understand a torque wrench. A bolt is in tension or in shear. If you don't understand that, if you torque a bolt that's got 1/1,000,000th of a drop of oil on it, it's not perfectly dry, the torque setting's off, it goes right away. So the goal is not to prove who's right and who's wrong, but Dave, I think you should check out the channel more and see some of the things. Now, on things that are meaningless, like the screws that hold the fairing on, anybody that tightens it up 4 or 5 times is going to know how tight it has to be. You can test yourself. If the screw comes loose a week later, you didn't tighten it enough. If you tighten it and you strip the threads, you've over-tightened it. But when you've been doing things as long as I have, or Luciano, or Glenn, or Vince, or any of the people, you do this for 50 years, 60 years, and you develop a touch. You almost don't need the torque wrench. But then when it's things like putting the discs on, I always double check everything with the torque wrench. And usually I'm pretty right, but if I'm wrong, it's always better to do it before you put it back on the bike. And I would say that's just one example of, if you're using Loctite, things change a little bit with Loctite. The torque settings change. And on aircraft, when I've worked on aircraft, and I owned a plane for 7 years, everything gets safety wired anyway. So, but you really want the torque right on things that matter, and on things that don't. I wouldn't spend my whole life worrying that one of the little tiny screws that's doing something, but I would worry about the ones that really count. And Dave, I appreciate your comment. I even appreciate the negative comments, but I think you're wrong. And if you find out that you've searched my channel and looked up doing something, just look up installing brake discs. We put the brake disc back on the I do remember this, on the MT-09. I even remember the torque setting. And it's good to have the manual. And what good is a torque wrench if you don't know the torque setting? It's a gray area. But anyway, it's always good to know the rules of engagement are, if you don't have a torque wrench and a bolt comes loose, you didn't tighten it enough. If you strip it, you tightened it too much. And as you work on things, you very quickly develop that skill. That skill comes quicker than you want it to sometimes. So anyway, this is the one that I really had the most concern with. RWL. Over the course of my having the R1, which is 13 years, he wants to know, he didn't mention what bike he has, maybe he has an R1, he wants to get rid of the clip-ons and put handlebars on. Well, you know what, that happens to a lot of people, an awful lot of people. First you have people that don't admit this, but then you have people that really do admit it. And then he seems to be one of them. But here's what happened to me, and I'll share my story. I bought the R1, I was 13 years younger. I rode around for a year or two with the clip-ons, but I was never comfortable going on a 3-hour ride. That last hour, my back was hurting and everything. And yeah, if I was going to do track days, I'd leave the clip-ons on and just suffer. Some part of that makes sense. But I'm riding on the street. And my motive with the R1 is I wanted to have a unique bike. I knew I wanted to customize it. I wanted to have a bike that had the real R1 engine, not the detuned version that you know, they take 30% of the power away and say it has more low-end torque. I didn't want that at all. I wanted the real R1 cross-plane where the stacks come off at 10,000 RPM, and I got it. But I wasn't happy with the comfort level. The seat is fine, this is fine, the ergonomic, but I never liked the bars being that low. So I bought a set of SWAT bars. SWAT bars raise it up 2 inches, and I said, ooh, this makes it a lot better. Wow, what happens if I raise it another inch? Well, I got risers. I'm going to show this. I got risers from an RD. They bolt right in where the clip-ons bolt on. You just drill that out as a real precision fit too. Bolt on the RD parts, put the handlebars of your choice. Now you have the tricky part. You've got to see if there's interference and maybe trim the fairing or whatever. Or sometimes you don't. If you have the swept back bars, like for an RD bars and GS bars, by the way, a good choice. Renthal bars are too far forward. You got to trim a lot of the fairing to do that. So, but the big concern is everybody has, will the clutch cable on an R1, you have to reroute the clutch cable. Same with the FZR. Throttle cable, you always have to reroute it to the other side of the gas tank. And it takes a lot of work. The electric, all the little wires that go to the switches, Some of them fit, some of them you got to make little extensions, and it can be time consuming. But basically at the end, the first time you get on a bike and you're used to riding with your neck down and you're used to looking up the top of your helmet, and all of a sudden you sit up and you've got the same power. It's a whole nother world, and worth, to me, all the bikes I've done, worth every minute I spent doing that. And I hope that information, I'll share some of this. I'll go out to the garage and show this in real life. All of that information, it applies to almost every bike, every sport bike. Now, if you're young, if you're in your 30s or 40s and you're doing track days, save your money. But when I was doing track days, there were several guys doing track days that had converted to bars. So, and now of course, all of the companies, and let's use Yamaha. Yamaha figured this out about 5 years after I got done doing it, and I had done several of my bikes. They come out with the MT-10. Well, no kidding. That'll save you a lot of work. But the MT-10 doesn't have the same exact engine as the R1. So, and I wanted the real engine. Now, some people it wouldn't matter. To me, it mattered. So, I have a unique motorcycle that fits me ergonomically, and it's got the engine that I want, the cross-plane engine. And for me, it was a lot of work getting it, but you could probably just go buy an MT-10 and you'd have 90% of it. Now, just to show in detail how the R1 was converted, the triple trees have 2 bolts in them, and you can use those bolt holes. Just do a precision fit of the drill, and these are from an RD. Of course, they bolt right into those holes, and there's plenty of clearance on the bottom if you want to double nut it even. These are the things that have worked for me. The clutch cable needed to be rerouted here and through into the fairing. The throttle cable needs to be rerouted to this side of the tank. And all of the wires, I've got them rerouted up under the handlebars. This worked out almost, and when I was done with it, I said, it's almost like a factory fit. Now, what happens if you look over at this side of the fairing, I've had to trim maybe 1/8 of an inch off the fairing. If I didn't want to do that, it would be simple. What'll happen, and never fall for this trick where when you turn it all the way to lock, it hits. If it hits, it's going to be inconvenient. Just make the trim and clean it all up. And sometimes you don't have to, or you can just, if you're comfortable with the set of bars, you can move the bars back. And that is how I've done, that's how my R1 worked out. And this bike, believe me, and my rides are typically 3 to 4 hours. On a 3 to 4 hour ride, very comfortable and powerful. Now, just to show, this is on an RD. They stock, they come with an RD. They're an exact replacement. I don't know that you can buy them. Probably Economy Cycle might have them, or they'd know where you could get them, or eBay. But they're about 20 bucks, and they interface with almost every other bike that I've ever converted. And by the way, these are Renthal bars. Renthal bars don't have a lot of sweep back, so you have to trim more of the fairing away. If you use stock bars, the stock bars from an RD or a GS, you almost don't have to trim the fairing away. Okay, my FZR is got the same thing. I use the same holes. There's 2 holes in here that keep the clip-ons from rotating. But again, when you drill that out, use a precision drill. Don't just drill it out 1/4 inch oversize or anything. And on this bike, the throttle cable, again, had to be rerouted. It's hydraulic, so the hydraulics were no big deal. I just moved them to the other side. And everything up here, this was the easiest of the bikes to convert. And you can see on this side, because I have the hydraulics, it's this that becomes the problem. I had to trim away this piece of the fairing. And other than that, and that's just relatively, it's a lot of work, but you can do it in you know, a couple sessions. And when you're done, the nice thing is when you're done, you have a bike you can ride in complete comfort. It's just like riding a touring bike then. It's like riding a touring bike with a sport bike engine. What a concept. Now on my GPX, I have risers. I think you can see I've made risers. And they have raised the bars up maybe 1.5 inches, I'm not sure. But I can raise this up and down, up and down. The hard part was getting the 2 bolts, and I had to get them from Bolt Depot because they need to be grade 8 bolts. Talk about torquing down. You need to torque these bolts down to keep that from getting loose. But that was the only thing, was getting these bolts from Bolt Depot and having the bars up. Now I've got a bike that I can ride in complete comfort, and I don't have to worry my neck's going to hurt at the end of the ride. Now, but of course that's all of that is in the eye of the beholder and in the neck of the beholder. Now, if you look at an MT-09, and I have done nothing with the MT-09, it has fit me to a T. But it does have risers, and I'm sure some aftermarket company, I didn't never looked, because I'm very happy the way this worked out. And they basically have, I'm just thinking out loud, I'm wondering if you can use these risers instead. If you couldn't get RD ones, I'm sure you can get MT-09 ones. But all of that, that's all probably really useful information if you really want to convert over. If you're outgrown the clip-ons or you've aged out of the process, or you just want to have a comfortable bike to ride. So, the final couple of questions we have here. Rick. I've answered Rick, but I'm going to answer it on a video too, because there's, again, a common thing to share information on. He wanted to know, he's got a GS, and he couldn't find a headlight for it. I guess the bucket too. And I don't really know the answer to this. I would try, but what I did, when I was well into restoring my GS, I had the opportunity to get another GS, a parts bike. And Ray and I went down to Pennsylvania and got a parts bike that I've used for a million things already, including the headlight bucket and the headlight and about 80 other things on it, the wheels, the bodywork, the you name it. So that the investment of buying a parts bike, even if you don't have a title, when you have a 40-year-old bike, it pays big time. But anyway, I did not know if anybody made replacement 9-inch headlights. I just did some work on the front of the GS, and I looked inside the headlight, and it reminded me why they had a 9-inch headlight. Because there's so many wires and things in there, oh my God. And you almost can't get the headlight back in until every one of them is in exactly the right spot. Well, and I thought I'd share that eBay would probably be, but he already knows, everybody knows that. eBay is probably one source if you're looking for the bucket. Economy Cycle is where I bought the RD. I bought a replacement headlight, but that's a 7-inch. And it was chrome. The chrome was outstanding. It fit right on the bike the way it should, and it looks retro. Even though you can't, it's probably difficult to find a real RD headlight somewhere. The retro one worked fine for me. And it's certainly bright enough. It's much brighter than a stock bulb would be. I think it's a different kind of bulb. Anyway, not that important because I don't do that much riding at night anyway. But now I always think one of the biggest things I could have done over the years is get an RD parts bike. And it wouldn't even matter if it didn't have a title or if it was in some kind of an accident or something. I would love to have a parts bike for the RD. Just for the same reason I have it for the GS. Spare parts, extra wheels, extra bodywork, a spare tank. And a lot of times people only want a couple $100 for a parts bike. Especially if it's been in an accident or if it doesn't have a tile. But anyway, one of the final things here, and I'm going to share this because this is making me crazy too. Mike says he has a 93 ZX600 and he likes the Pirelli Sport Demons too. Now, I don't know if a 93 has a 16-inch front wheel. Mine has a 16-inch front wheel. I have 2 sets of wheels, so I really have a lot of choices here by having that extra set of wheels. But here's the thing. He mentioned it's getting hard to get tires, or I mentioned it, I don't remember. Well, it's getting so hard to get tires that Vlad, who is a tire dealer, is having trouble. We've ordered the tire, a Sport Demon for the RD rear. We've ordered it, and it seems like the order went into the black hole in space. I don't know. But getting tires, my suggestion is, and Turbo Steve did the smartest thing of all, he knows he's going to need tires a month or 2 from now. Order them now. Because you probably, unless you go to a dealer and pay list price, you're just going to go and get on a waiting list for tires. If you have an odd-sized tire for an older bike. Now, I don't know. Dallas put Avons on his GS. Joe Padula put Avons on his GS. They had no trouble getting them. But I know several people have told me you can't get Commanders now. Commanders are hard to get for these odd-sized older bikes. I don't know, but best suggestion of the whole video, if you need tires 6 months from now, order them now. So if you've never seen the channel, Itchy Boots. Itchy Boots is a woman, a Dutch woman, I believe, who travels the world. And I think she's in America right now. Another great channel. And I thought we'll rename Stefan, the Itchy Stefan of Romania, as he travels the world. Anyway, I'm only going to be traveling North Jersey in southern New York in my adventures. My adventures are limited because of the time windows that I have and the family obligations, but it still keeps me young to a certain degree, keeps my mind from turning into jello, and I just love having these older bikes. To me, they are a treasure, and if you can keep them where they're shiny and they run good and they're reliable, it's a feeling. It's just hard to explain to people that don't know it. And thank you to everyone who shares information, everybody. And thank you so much for watching.